angiogram, which has already got multiple stents. Tell you the truth, under those circumstances, I completely forgot I was supposed to be here.
Yeah, I heard she was ill.
And all of a sudden, boom, it was like, whoa. So then I got here, I rushed down the hall to where we always are. It was dark. I thought, oh my God, it's in Florence. They're surely supposed to be in Florence. How did I read that wrong? So I asked downstairs, and my only answer response to her was, well, thank heavens I am in the right building. So here I am, folks. Aren't you glad?
Yeah. You see, the wife, Lindy, was in the hospital. Did I hear correctly?
You heard correctly. She's still there, of course, and will be there for a while, I guess.
Yes, and I was concerned that you'd even make it, and I didn't bother you even about calling or anything when I found out that she was in the hospital.
Well, you're so good.
Well,
I roasted you the other night. I'm
That's
sorry
right.
for everything I said.
So I'm just really going through old stuff that I'm donating everything I've collected through the years. Did you ever see that picture, Don? Is that, how about, now it says, Old Salt Well, this is at Blue Licks. And I thought if they could have something that nice at Blue Licks, well, we're a lot more bigger than they are. But so then, here's a photo. This is an old picture that was made. Big Boone State Park.
I've seen that.
Have you seen that?
The picnic table.
Yeah. That's all that was there for so long. People were kind of getting bitter. That was done in a matter of, bitterness. There again, I was telling you Bob Moody and this Earl Tanner, who was, he was very busy in the Northern Kentucky Archaeological Club. But we always considered Earl a pot hunter. You know what I'm talking about? They go out to a site and just pick up and carry away. They don't care where it came from. They don't record where it came from or what culture it was or anything. They were pot hunters. Well, he was, but he was a damn good one. I mean, he had a wonderful collection of stuff. And now, this is Ellis Crawford at the Gum Springs Sycamore Stone, and that was the place for a long time. It was more prominent than the well behind the church, and I dug it out and cleaned it out. That was a hollowed out sycamore stump, and if you've ever seen the way sycamores, well, they'll hollow out. We've climbed in sycamore trees on our hikes. Remember down at Dinsmore?
They were so big it was like a small hut.
Yeah, you could damn near live in a sycamore stump. Well, that's what they use there. And, all right. Okay. Yeah, and this is the swinging bridge. That's how you used to get across to O'Rourke's place. Remember that swinging bridge there?
Oh, sure.
That's all. That's the only way you could get to the county's 2 acres of ground. Okay, that goes in the collection. And now I even this is our competition, 45-inch bone leg of mesa tusk found at Blue Licks. Well, naturally, we had to find one bigger than theirs, and with the passage of time, we did. My mom, she kept some of this stuff. Okay, the cartoons. This is the Courier Journal. Why do we call them mammoths? Because it's easier to say than humongous. I guess it was easier to say than humongous. And now we've got artist drawings of what the museum and all of that was going to be. And the diorama. Now that's the diorama that they were first coming, and they pretty well adhered to that, I mean, with the mesa being stuck in the ground and all of that. Okay, this was some of the early, and we got all of this. You get it all. You get it all. All right. Now, Asa, they had questions here for us. The influence of Ellis Crawford and William Fitzgerald, humongous was their influence. It wouldn't have worked without William Fitzgerald, would it? He was the Secretary of Treasury. He's the guy, retired teacher at Holmes. He taught printing. He's the guy that made these books. He made our receipt books. He made everything we used. All the stationery was done by
Any of you that did not know Mr. Fitzgerald, you missed something very nice, very important to know.
and his wife.
He was an incredible gentleman. I was at his home one day. He had an awesome collection of everything historical. I remember when I heard that he taught printing instead of history.
Yeah.
Oh, this is really strange.
Printing teacher at home.
Anyhow, he got a phone call. We love visiting each other because my interests were the same as his, although his not. I'm a historian. I'm especially a historian of Walton. Truth be told, my knowledge, I'm not kidding, I'm not being immodest or modest or otherwise, is really quite shallow. I make a good impression, but I don't know nearly as much as is attributed
Your
to me.
brother's smarter than you are in that regard.
And some others I could know. Anyway, the phone rang, and all of a sudden, you know, he's all very pleasant, he got very serious. Some contractor had hit where there wasn't supposed to be anything, a casket, in fact two. As soon as he hit the first one, he was very careful, and so the second one was not damaged at all. He was told that on the phone, and of course I couldn't wait to see him again because he immediately left. He was a person consulted about those things, anything like that that came along. Now remember, we're talking about old Florence. When I was in high school at Dixie Heights from 1944 to 48, Florence had a population of less than 500 total, and I knew most of them. And Bill Fitzgerald was, of course, the mayor. The city building was that old, was that a schoolhouse?
The old schoolhouse.
Yeah.
Town
on
hall.
Main Street.
It wasn't any bigger than this room here, hardly.
On Stringtown.
But that was everything. That was the whole show. Anyhow, when I next saw him, I said, what was that all about, Mr. Fitzgerald, or Bill? He said, well, it shouldn't have been there. It wasn't on any map or plat I've ever found or was able to find. But what was hit is commonly, well, it wasn't commonly known as, it was known as a crane and breed casket. Now they look like the caskets that you see on Halloween that are imitations of spooky things, but they were extremely expensive. The corpse was placed in the casket, and it was iron, and it was all bolted together, bolted. And it had a faceplate of real heavy glass. And you could see the remains if you look through there. Of course, that was fine for viewing, I suppose, but this thing had been in the ground Lord knows how long. Also, he said, and I think I'm getting this correctly stated, that Abraham Lincoln was buried in a crane and breed casket. They were quite the thing. When a soldier from the Civil War named Webster was dug up in Warsaw or Gallatin County because of the Markland Dam needs, different undertakers had contracts to move bodies. And the darndest thing, they were very careful, and they usually you don't find anything. You find a belt buckle or something because the old caskets would deteriorate, but here was this like new, and they brought it out carefully and they wiped off the faceplate. You know, the soldier in there was named Webster. It was as if he had died a week before. His red beard was even intact. Of course, he was reburied, but Mr. Fitzgerald telling me about this said that the one that was broken resulted in quick deterioration of the corpse. But the one that wasn't broken, of course, they were very careful with it. They reburied them, and I don't remember if he told me where. He was just really something. I'm gonna tell some of my stories of Big Bone real quickly.
Sure.
Anyhow, Mr. Fitzgerald was one of these guys who was a mover and a shaker, and he got things done, and he made it look easy in the process. He was a lovely man. When I was a little boy, Uncle Scott Jack, one of the nicest, most wonderful uncles that anybody ever had, played baseball, and he was good at it. And in those days, every town had a baseball team. There was no TV, radio wasn't much, and the entertainment was baseball, the all-American sport. Well, they played at Big Bone. Now, then as now, baseball bored the heck out of me. As it is said, the reason that Abner Doubleday took 6 months to invent it is because he kept dozing off. But anyway, we would be down there, my brother and I, watching Uncle Scott play vigorously. And even after about 3 innings, we were over in the bog area looking around. Because my great-grandmother, who was Jenny Osman, was born in 1858. She could tell us things about the Civil War in Boone County that a little girl was very afraid of. Seeing soldiers and things were fearful. Anyhow, though, when my mother was born and raised in Beaver, went to a one-room schoolhouse there. So we're connected with that part of the country. My grandmother would skin the cat on a huge tusk coming out of the embankment. They thought nothing about it at all. It had always been there. What it was irrelevant to them. It was a toy. But my brother and I would go over there and play, and we had entertained ourselves by watching the ground shake. Little boys that wouldn't weigh 100, 110, 15 pounds could jump up on soil as far away from you, from here to you, and horseweeds would move. Now, after that, of course, the water table moved down consistently and rather constantly to where it doesn't budge now when you're on it. It's just like normal soil. But that was a carryover from the bog area that used to capture the big animals and other animals that came down to Big Bone. I had heard, I was always interested in this kind of thing. I think anybody that has an inquiring mind would be. And I had heard that the only complete mastodon skeleton in the world was in the British Museum in London. And it came from Big Bone. I couldn't wait to see it, so in 1985, Libby and I went to London, and I went to the British Museum in London, and I started looking for it. And I found this huge mastodon skeleton. But it didn't have a plaque on the bottom of it saying Big Bone or anything. Well, all of a sudden I turned on the lawyer's side of my being. By the time I got through, curator and all were in the basement with me and Libby. It was an amazing thing, of course, when you look stern enough and act like you may cause a fuss, things get done. Of course, I asked about it right off the bat in a rather gentle way. Blah, 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 blah. Where is it? Why is it? What is it? Finally got the answer downstairs where all the bones are, the big bones. The British were very persnickety, as they should be. And they discovered by some kind of modern method that every bone on there was legitimate except one rib bone, which they decided had come from another animal. So they took the plaque away until they could decide just how to word what it was. But they assured me that that was the mastodon from Big Bone. But that's not